Don't forget, you can reach the latest episode of Potomac Watch anytime. Just ask your smart speaker, play the Opinion Potomac Watch podcast.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome back. Alicia, what do you make of the president's legal authority here and how this would play out in the courts, which is maybe a question that's not getting the attention that it deserves? It's true that Congress has delegated a pretty wide authority over trade to the executive branch. One of the laws that Trump used in his first term was Section 301 of the Trade Act of 1974. This is what Trump used to put tariffs on China, but that is targeted at unfair trade practices. So I'm not sure if that could be used to apply to non-trade situations like migration. When Trump was threatening Mexico in 2019 to try to get an expansion of the Remain in Mexico agreement, he was citing a different law. That is the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. And that gives some broad authority to the president after declaring an emergency to deal with threats from abroad. But that, as far as I understand, has never been used to impose tariffs. So there are some open questions. If Trump comes into office on January 20 and says, I'm declaring an emergency for migration and for fentanyl, I'm citing this law, IEPA, as it is termed, and I'm going to impose those tariffs now. It seems to me that you could get a court case pretty quickly and maybe an emergency appeal up to the Supreme Court about whether that is truly within the scope of the president's powers as delegated by Congress.
Right. I think this is one that the Supreme Court does not want to touch with a 10-foot pole because it does raise a lot of thorny questions. The courts are usually deferential to the president when they are exercising their powers pursuant to an emergency or national security purposes. And that was actually the justification that the Supreme Court gave for letting President Biden pull back Trump's Remain in Mexico policy. On the other hand, there's also the question of, can the Congress delegate to the president in a somewhat vague law, potentially limitless authority to do whatever he wants. Now, there's going to be a Supreme Court case coming up that actually the court just accepted that relates to the non-delegation doctrine, which really hasn't been used or invoked by the Supreme Court for almost 100 years. And this is exactly that, whether Congress can delegate to the president sweeping powers that really are under its purview under the Constitutional, and trade is actually the purview of Congress. And so it really depends. And again, I don't think the Supreme Court wants to take it up, but I think if you got a challenge in the lower courts, I do think that this would get stayed almost immediately, just like Trump's travel ban was. And that was in part because he didn't follow the proper procedures in putting it in place. And I think that you could get a similar challenge to this under that they just didn't go through and follow perhaps an Administrative Procedure Act. And it's really hazy whether the executive must do that to exercise these authorities.
Thank you, Alicia and Monet. Thank you all for listening. You can email us at pwpodcast@wsj.com. If you like the show, please hit that subscribe button, and we'll be back tomorrow with another edition of Potomac Watch.